substitute. Yay!
Yay!
Another school teacher who, I don't know if you're going to be funny or not. He's not going to be. We literally, John Muir came in over the transom. He wrote a couple days ago saying, hey, I've got this 20-minute presentation I'd love to give on this work that I do about journaling and science. And I said, oh geez, we're full up, we really don't have any room. And then Raleigh calls this morning and says, so here he is. By golly, we have no holes in our program. Jack, excuse me, would you mind introducing yourself, giving a little bit of background, and then telling us about your talk?
Sure.
Yay!
Thank you, folks. I'm really honored and delighted to be here with all of you. I am a stealth skepticism educator. I teach nature journaling and tools for observing the world around us, how to make ourselves more intentionally curious about the world, and how to try to figure things out using evidence. And it's a lot of fun. Essentially, we go out in the woods and we start with, like, let's draw some squirrels, and it ends up into sort of leading us into how do we make a relationship between claims and evidence. And it's a lot of fun, and it's actually a worldwide movement that is growing. We just started a nonprofit organization to help people engage with nature journaling to make a deeper connection with the natural world, and also our ability to, is that me? No, to also how do we make sense from our own sense experience. And this gentleman and I were actually talking over the break about how our ability to perceive what is right in front of us is not as good as we think it is. Actually, one of my a talk that I gave, we had one of these little things where people could kind of click and vote. You've seen those little,
yeah.
It's neat. Everybody's got their own little clicker. And so I use that to ask the group that I was with how many people think sort of where you are in sort of percentile, how good are you at observing? And everybody put themselves above average, which is great. So we can, but some of us have to be on the other side of the curve, right? Then on top of that, what your brain is then, when information comes in, you're struggling with your 7 plus or minus 2 of like how much stuff that you can kind of deal with in the moment. And then once stuff is in there, as Loftus was pointing out, that your ability to then remember this stuff and kind of later on make meaning from it is really plastic and changes. And our memories are a better tool for kind of giving us a consistent narrative rather than being a historical document. And so how do we make sense in the face of all that? My goal today is that all of you, at the end of this, you say, like, actually, I think I want to start keeping a nature journal myself, right? We could also call it a science journal, a thinking journal. What it is essentially a tool for getting ourselves to notice, practice deep observation, practice intentional curiosity, and practice making connections between things. So it's this process of what I call I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And I want to share that with you and give you some tools. If you think, oh, I think I'd like to learn more about that, to give you some tools at the end to help you be able to do that. And this is not something where you need to be an artist to be able to do it. You don't need to be able to a scientist to do it. But if you start doing this on a regular basis, this will turn you into somebody who can draw what they see. And will also really, I think it really helps the way that we put ideas together. So here we go. This is your brain.
That is my brain.
This is your brain on paper.
Ah.
Any questions? So what this is as I'm out there in the field, I am looking at phenomena that I see. I'm trying to get stuff. It's easy to be in a place and kind of be washed over, like, wow, that's really neat, or that's really beautiful. I'm going to remember that forever. But our brains don't work that way, right? our brains are quickly going, squirrel, right? You know, we're distracted by the next best thing. So what I do is I practice intense, deep observation and intentional curiosity. With sometimes it's a grand phenomenon, or here I'm doing this with vegetables from Costco, right? And how can I look at the phenomenon from Costco in a way that will change my ways of visualizing information and be able to practice intentional curiosity with this, so that you don't need some spectacular phenomenon that's in front of you, but you know, here it is. This is a tomato that is going rogue in my pantry. And it started sprouting out through its skin. And so what I'm doing is I'm recording, how can I document that? What do I need to notice? What later on would I have said to myself, you know what I really wished I paid attention to? What I'm trying to do is real time, do that here. And then also intentionally ask questions and make connections between what I'm seeing. Can I look at this and not just go like, oh, that's funky, but actually in the moment, get myself to ask questions that then follow me down a little rabbit hole. Essentially, I want to create rabbit holes that I can go spelunking in. And then when you are in front of some phenomenon that is grand and wonderful, right? The things that your brain goes, yes, it's the eclipse, I will pay attention, right? You've actually already trained your ability to notice when if you can train on the thing from Costco, then when you are in front of some crazy grand phenomenon, your ability to observe, to wonder, to remember is even better, right? But sometimes of us, we only kind of lean in when we have something that is really novel in front of us. And so what I'm trying to do is to train myself to kind of lower the threshold so that there's novelty everywhere, even in the vegetable that I've seen a million times. So there's 3 different parts of this. There's attention, curiosity, and creativity. And we're going to look at how does this practice amp up each one of those. And I think that this is very much a skeptic skill set, toolkit. So we're going to start over here. This is what I call, for attention, this is what I call I notice. My mantra, again, is I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. I notice is all about how can I get myself to pay attention. So this is my pantry often does go rogue. And this is the onion that started to grow. My daughter thought it was so lovely that she wanted to adopt it. And so it became our pet for a while. It became this thing that was sort of this investigation. But when you're kind of looking at something, kind of like, oh, that's interesting, maybe I'll just kind of make food. How can I get myself to notice things about that, or to wonder things about it, that if I were just being utilitarian in the moment, my brain wouldn't do? Here is going for a walk in the woods, looking at the way the honeysuckle vines climb up a tree, and then wondering about how did it get there? What is the mechanism behind that? So trying to not just sort of to see a phenomenon, but go like, oh, how did you get there? To notice the things that I don't know. I intensively study nature and natural history, and what I want to do is regularly get myself to lean into not re-recognizing and celebrating something that I already studied. Oh, there it is again. I feel good that I know its Latin name. But to notice what I don't know. Over here on this page, you see there's a sort of a study of newt locomotion. This is a study of the relationship between color and leaf size on sprouting poison oak. And this is a diagram visualizing how different plant communities grow on different sides of hillsides relative to cardinal directions. So you can see that these pages have a whole bunch of different sorts of visualization. There's a lot, but any phenomenon that I see can kind of count as something that is worth paying attention to. If you're a birder, you've seen coots a bazillion times. How can you get yourself to look at the coots in a way that you learn something new from a phenomenon that you see a million times? It's not like, oh, coots again. Like, ooh, look at these coots. There's actually lessons for us if we practice intentionally looking for them in every phenomenon that we can see. So the second part, so I'm using this process to, for the first part I should say, I notice basically if it's you see something, say something, right? Whatever I notice, I get it down on paper, The paper can hold much more information than my 7 plus or minus 2 ideas that I can hold up here in my noggin. My electric meat is really, really limited, right? So then, let's go over to wonder. I don't want to just wait for a question to come to me. What I'm doing here is I am trying to be intentionally curious. Intentionally curious. How can I stimulate myself to kind of wonder about things instead of going, oh, cool, it's a kingfisher. Right? I want to look at it and kind of go, what don't I know? What don't I understand? So I will often start with my observations and then kind of say, intentionally ask myself, what can I ask here? Here, wondering about, like, what is going on with the kingfisher's calculation? Like, you stick a stick into water and the stick bends. Right? It looks like it bends. There's this refraction thing going on. This thing's got to calculate for that, for flying down into the water and catching something underneath. That's really, really, really cool. So I realized that I really don't understand how that would work. Wouldn't it be interesting to kind of study those sort of angles in the water to get some sort of an insight, not the answer, but maybe a little bit more of an insight of what's going on with these. Here, looking at bull kelp. We've all looked at bull kelp a million times. Right? Now, I start with some observations, and then like, what don't I know? Like, let's think about the gas that's in there. Yeah, there's this gas, there's this empty space in there. What is that? Is that oxygen in there? Because when it's photosynthesizing, it's creating oxygen, maybe oxygen's going in there? Or is it carbon dioxide because it's using energy? Like, what is the gas that's inside the bladder of a bull kelp? I never wondered about that, but what I want to do, again, is in everything I'm looking at, I want to celebrate what I don't know and push myself to actively wonder. If I don't have a pad of paper with me and I'm not writing it down, I don't ask questions. But having it be part of my process, oh, I've got some observations about bull kelp. What do I wonder about, right? That prompts me to get curious in the moment. Here's another one. These are looking at acacia trees in Africa. There's a little bit of topiary going on, trimmed by the animals there. So I'm looking, initially making a collection of the shapes of acacias that have been nibbled by these animals and noticing that there's a color difference in them. And then I'm wondering, like, what, if you were to analyze those chemically, what would the chemical difference be between those? Are the ones at top perhaps more palatable? I don't know. There's a different color that I can definitely see. So again, trying to find questions everywhere I go. And here's the last piece it reminds me of for your creative thinking. And the way that this little piece works, this is really interesting. So I want to define my terms here. When I say creativity has sort of become a buzzword, everything is all about creativity. So when I say creativity, what I'm specifically meaning is your brain's ability to make useful connections between seemingly unrelated things. So we're practicing, sir.
Noticing patterns. Yes.
Absolutely, right? So if I can, like, this ties in with some pattern that I'm already aware of. I want to take this and hook it in with those patterns. That's creativity.
But knowing the difference between the human nature, but knowing the difference between the human nature of noticing these patterns and differentiating when they are relevant and meaningful and not.
Right. Yeah. So that's right. So and because but also to invite in, like, some of these things, these patterns that I see, I'm going to see, like, here's this sort of, let's go for an example, right? Here I'm looking at, again, I'm going to Costco, right? Dragon fruit from Costco. Those right. So I'm looking at this, and I say to myself, one of the things I said, like, this reminds me of a cactus. This really reminds me of a cactus. So then I'm thinking, I don't really know much about dragon fruit. Is this a kind of cactus, right? Or does it share a close common ancestor with cactus, right? So I've got these little diagrams over here, right? Am I thinking, like, ooh, there's cactus, right, over here, and it's got this common ancestor, or this is a kind of cactus. I don't know, I'm kind of diagramming these things, I'm wondering about them, right? And otherwise, if I weren't intentionally going like, what does this remind me of? My brain wouldn't have gone there. And I wouldn't be thinking about how is this structure like other sorts of things. Just want to do a quick time check. How am I? Good. All right, I always go over. But wait, there's more. Because here's the banana. Again, learning from Costco. This time I'm using the it reminds me of to look at this blotch on it. There's a blotch on my banana, and I think like, ooh, that looks like a pintail duck. Ooh, that looks like a dragon. It looks like a witch riding a broom, right? There's my little blotch, and it could be any of those things. So this is more of a playful, a fanciful way. What does this mean to me, right? And I want to let my brain go in all of these directions. If there's something in your neural net that somehow tags into this, I want to hook into that. It could give me something like, let's say when I'm thinking about this structurally looks a lot like that time that I was trying to dissect that prickly pear and I got all those glochids in my fingers. Like, why aren't there glochids on this if it is a cactus? Here, I'm having fun with seeing the witch on this, but that then is tying in with something in my brain. It's going to make it much more likely that this experience and this phenomenon will stick with me. If I have a little idea that comes into my brain and there's no hook for it, no place for it to live, no relationship, it's really easy for that to kind of go out my ear. But if I can intentionally tie that in with, how does this relate to who's here? I'll be able to find patterns, right? And play with those. So this is an intentional, playful way. The more that I practice looking for connections in the world around me, the more I will be able to find them. And then there's the other fun part of that, which I think you're alluding to, is because sometimes we see patterns that we've just made up, right? So yes, absolutely.
The face on the moon.
Yes.
The face on the moon, the face on Mars.
No, that was really an alien civilization, did you know? You saw this thing on YouTube? Totally concluded. Right? Yeah. So could this just be pareidolia, right? Or, but if it's an interesting, it's go like, oh, I do see a face on that. Isn't that neat, right? Right? Just sort of notice where your brain goes, right? But to do so intentionally. Mm-hmm. I'm making connections intentionally. I'm observing intentionally. I am asking questions and being curious intentionally. And this on a piece of paper is fundamentally worlds different than if I just try to do it again inside the electric meat, right? This for me is, it is easy, and because it's easy, my brain doesn't have to expend any calories. This takes some energy and work. And that's why it's so useful. It is slow food for your brain. And it will slow you down, right? So I wonder, it reminds me of. That is my naturalist mantra. And that's what I'm putting onto a piece of paper. And what I want to do is to encourage all of you to try to do that. If you think to yourself, I would like to do that, I've got a website, which is johnmuirlaws.com. I've got hundreds of hours of free tutorials on how to do this sort of stuff. Free, no paywall, none of that. And there is I just started a nonprofit organization. We have training for teachers, how to teach this to students. And for also anybody that wants to do it. It's called the Wild Wonder Foundation. And I want to encourage you, wildwonder.org, to check those out. I think you might find that this is a useful practice for our mindset of paying attention and making meaning in the world.
Do we have questions?
Sounds like Leonardo da Vinci's scrapbook, what you're doing.
Absolutely. Da Vinci's notebook is, we think it's like, oh, isn't it wonderful that Da Vinci was this really creative, clever person who also happened to have made notebooks. and we can now look into those notebooks to see what Da Vinci was thinking. That gets it totally wrong. Da Vinci was Da Vinci because Da Vinci made those notebooks. If Da Vinci didn't make those notebooks, Da Vinci would not have been Da Vinci. You want to think like Da Vinci, start acting like Da Vinci, and get your ideas out of here and onto paper. Absolutely right. So,
I got the microphone.
oh, you got the mic. Okay, you'll be the water mic. Okay. I'll stay up here so that I'm easier to track.
I learned some way to avoid the paper. It's called talking directly to your subconscious. So you force the idea that you have in your conscious, which is very limited, time and speed and capacity, into your subconscious, which is the big portion of your brain. And when you put it there correctly, the subconscious can process it and give you results. That means sometimes you say, you have problem today, and when I wake up in the morning, it's all gone, because your subconscious was doing the work for you. And I think this is very powerful tool, very similar to the paper, but you don't need pen and pencil because it's not available for you all the time.
I agree with you. When I don't have my journal with me, I do exactly what you're talking about, but I'm going to take it one step further, because there's some research on this, a phenomenon called the production effect. And the production effect is if you're doing something that takes a little bit more work, that energy makes your brain, makes that a little bit more sticky. So a great example of using the production effect is, you ever kind of gone into some party and you introduce yourself like, hi, nice to meet you, I'm Jack, and they introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Stuart.
So nice to meet you.
What do you do?
And you're thinking, like 30 seconds later, you're thinking, what was his name? Right? He just said his name, right? Watch this. Right? We're now going to use the production effect. Hi, nice to meet you. My name's Jack.
Hi, Jack. I'm Stuart.
Stuart, it's really nice to meet you. Did you see that? We're now 40% more likely to remember each other's names. I'm going to remember that that's Stuart. He's going to remember I'm Jack. Go boom! That's the production effect. You're saying, like, okay, I'm just going to take my phone and just put it over here, and you put it in a non-standard place, and you forget where you put your phone. If you say out, turns out it has to be out loud, right? I am putting my phone on the table there, right? I'm putting it on the chair, and I'm going to, but because if you do it just inside your head, it doesn't work, right? And and actually, there's even kind of one more fun wrinkle on this. The research on this, they found that if you give it a little bit more emphasis, your memory is improved. I'm going to put this on the chair. Right? Stuart. Right? Right? It's nice. So, and actually, even better than that, right? But this is more socially awkward. They get increasingly socially awkward, but the amount that you remember improves. So if you do it this way, hi, I'm Jack. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Jack. I'm Stuart.
Stuart, it's a pleasure to meet you. If you sing it, Stuart, right? Then you're going to remember that so much better. But then it's like that conversation is over, right? Yeah, that's right. It has there's a self-defeating thing in that. But essentially, I'm taking advantage of the production effect when I'm doing this, right? When I'm saying things out loud. And the way that there's a lot of clear research that shows that this can hold more than my brain can, right? And when I then can look down at my notes and thoughts of it, I can actually juggle more information than I could just inside my 7 plus or minus 2. And so the effect of this dramatically improves my ability to think. Without that, verbalizing it. Great. The more that we can intentionally do those things, the better off we are. Yes?
Question back here.
Now that we have AI at our disposal, and we can get all these questions answered right away, right? Do you think which one is better? Should we still write down the question and wonder about it, or should we just go straight to the AI and say, what is this?
Oh, that's a wonderful, wonderful question. I love this idea. So here's how I dance with that. I don't have a clear answer for you, but here are the things that I take into consideration. Sometimes I know that there's another phenomenon called the Zergenic effect. So the Zergenic effect is if you've ever taken a test, and you take the test, and then you forget everything on the test, you've been Zergenicked, right? When your brain gets a feeling of task completion, and we're out of here, right? You free up all these neural resources for engaging with whatever it is, and whoop, that stuff is gone. So very often, if you get a question, kind of if you close the loop, then your brain will discard that. I like to intentionally keep some open loops. I'll show you one. There's an open loop in this journal here. I was on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada at Crowley Lake, and there's this place where there are these strange columns, right, that are on the shore. They are about as round as a tree trunk. And they're in a volcanic bank that's being eroded by Crowley Lake. And so I took several pages of notes on these. I can pass those around if people are interested in seeing the Crowley Lake columns. And then I was like what? And I was thinking, like, what are these? Are these like petrified trees? Like, no, it's the same matrix inside of these as this stuff over here in the tough. It was a really tough problem. And the, and so, what I was thinking, like, I was totally stumped on what caused the Crowley Lake columns. And then I got back and like, I'm gonna Google this, right? And I type it in, and then it was one thing came up and said, scientists figure out like what's going on with the Crowley Lake columns. So I was going, and then I stopped. And I decided I was gonna keep that one an open loop. Sometimes to let ourselves live in the mystery is going to prompt that to be, it's this raw spot that keeps chafing me, and I keep wondering about it, and that is useful. Sometimes, however, getting an answer, if that will then prompt me into the next thing, that will then take me further on a different journey, but also an interesting one. But if getting the answer, I then go, right, then the answer is not going to be useful to me. So what I do is I often will think to myself, like, will getting an answer on this, very often what I like to do if I do get an answer for this thing, I want to see, can I then find the next question on the other side of that? And also, as you start doing this, you will very quickly start asking questions. The answer is nowhere on Google. You may be the first person to ever ask that question, right? And also, some of the information that's out there on the web is just wrong, right? So just because I can look it up doesn't mean that it's solved. But will answering this question help me live in a world of wonder and mystery? Sometimes I'm choosing intentionally to keep an open loop. Sometimes I close this loop, but then try to open an adjacent one to that. So I let all of those approaches in.
And just following up, that question was specifically about AI. And AI will almost always give you an answer, even if it's not a real answer anyway. And sometimes it's nice just to leave that open. We have another question back here.
Great talk.
Thank you, sir.
What do you recommend for people that have next to zero artistic ability?
I am glad you asked, all right? So this is not about art. This is not about art. It's about thinking. So if your comfort place is writing, your journals will start off and be mostly writing. But what I encourage people to do is, if you're a writer, then to start in your journal taking a few, there are three languages. Right? There's words, there's pictures, and there's numbers. All right? So I'm dyslexic, so I go to the pictures. Right? The pictures are my comfort zone, right? Because I can't misspell them. And so there's lots of different ways of using pictures, and sometimes I'm making diagrams of ideas, and sometimes it's of the specific phenomenon. And having a bigger vocabulary of how you could do that is really useful. So here, kind of breaking something down into two parts. This is a wasp that found itself inside when it should have been out. Or here's a cross section. So a landscape drawing of this lagoon would have been difficult, but making a little cross-section diagram, I can actually get a lot more information into it there. Here, making a map. Here's a diagram of molehills versus gopher hills, and then aged over time and color-coded outside in front of a school. I was doing this with a bunch of kids. And so that, oh, and here's then a cross-section across here, there's that there, anyway. So this doesn't have to be a pretty picture. With the pictures, think of useful pictures or diagrams, not pretty. If you move the goalpost to useful, then you'll make a lot more drawings. And if you start doing this on a regular basis, what happens is with neuroplasticity, our brains change, go like, oh, you keep showing up for this drawing kind of visual representation thing, I guess we gotta devote some neurons to that, and start stitching those things together. And about a year of doing that, your friends will be saying, oh man, you're so lucky to have that gift. You can draw, but I wasn't born with the drawing gene. Drawing is not a gift, it's a skill that you can develop. But if you go into it saying, I want to make pretty pictures, and you look at your picture and you say, that's not a pretty picture, then you stop. So we go into this from the point of view, I want to make useful pictures and diagrams. Similarly, words, there's a lot of different ways that you can use words. And words can describe things that you can't with pictures. So if words are your thing, start there and go deep with it. There's a lot of research that people who keep a diary, they're more emotionally intelligent than people who don't. Right? So the same is true with any part of your observation. So here I'm looking at this rainbow halo effect around my shadow in the dew. The information I'm able to record here, there'd be no way I could record this with pictures. Really essential. So I want to, even though I'm a dyslexic, scared of words, I want to force myself into doing this because I know it'll make my brain work better. Or here is kind of going a different direction, looking out at a pride of lions, and I can document that with some drawings. But then I got into haiku, right? And these are all my kind of haiku. This is my favorite one. You seem so peaceful. I want to nuzzle your face. That might not go well. Right? Or this, I found that I led a trip to the Galapagos Islands to do nature journaling. And on the second day, discovered I had COVID. I spent the rest of the time like Moses in the promised land, not being able to go in, but licking out my little porthole. Right?
Aww.
And so I decided I'm going to nature journal COVID-19, right? And so there's some graphs and sort of where things were aching and how the tests worked, and then I wrote about how I was feeling on one of those days and how angry and how let down and disappointed and and all these sorts of things. And then on another day, on the next day, I started thinking about what I was grateful for, and it completely changed my frame of mind and frame of reference, and kind of going into that with words there reinvented the experience of having COVID in the Galapagos for me. But that was an essential part of my kind of healing and dealing with it. But that couldn't have been done just with pictures. So you want to emphasize whatever it is. So these are all really good ways of doing it. The last way is with numbers. And this gentleman and I were talking earlier about the importance of kind of finding numbers in the world around us. A lot of us are number phobic because we had a math teacher who taught us it was all about calculation and speed rather than a way of thinking. But there's many ways of incorporating numbers into what you do. This is a study of looking at worms out on the asphalt after a rain. I was out counting them and looking at how far away they got from the grass with a group of elementary school children. And then we went in and we saw this big cloud of gulls out there doing something. And we went back out and there were 2 left. Right? But that whole story is with numbers. Or this is looking at sort of measuring the height of the sky and the direction of the sun as seen from a school playground on the solstices and the equinoxes. Again, numbers are such a powerful way of doing it. Last thing I want to show you about numbers is this. I decided as part of my skeptical journey to go meet people who I have a different sort of frame of mind with, and found myself at a Flat Earth conference. And people there were really, really nice to me. And I made a bunch of friends, and we disagreed about things. And since that conference, we have been doing some investigations together to look at different phenomena. And one of those that we've been looking at is the idea of why is it cold at night? One hypothesis being, well, the sun's not out, and there is, and so the heat is just sort of being radiated away from the Earth. The other is that the moon beams down cold light, like the sun beams down heat. And I said, that's interesting because we can test that. So this is a test documented with the numbers. So the numbers, your sort of experience, like it's cold, it's nighttime. Now, last night was really cold. Do you see the frost? Right? But, and there was more, it was colder last night than the night before, and the moon was bigger tonight, last night. So, but if you make a little barrier that blocks tiles from the moonlight, and I've got two different ways of measuring those, and then run a student t-test, what I found is that the ones that were in the moonlight were not colder. Actually, they were slightly warmer than the ones, and I don't know why, than the ones that were on the other side. But here, the numbers tell the story. So you've got words, pictures, and numbers. Find your own comfort place and start there, but know that your brain will take all sorts of other adventures depending on what you have. So,
Question back here?
Last question, please.
Last question.
Well, this is just a comment on a couple of questions ago.
great.
That you had this question about should you look up an AI explanation of it or sort of leave it a mystery. And the third option is actually doing science.
Yes, absolutely. I've got a whole other lecture on that. But what my sort of framework on that is to, when we come up with these questions, my approach into that is to first categorize the question into one of three categories. It's either a let's see, a could it be, or a let it be. And let's see, these are questions that I can, by direct observation, I can determine, here by direct observation, I was able to determine that the ones that were in the moonlight were not colder. Direct observation. That's a let's see question. Another type of question is the could it be question. These are the ones where you come up with hypotheses. Why is that? Well, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. And there are ways of testing those. Once you've got a could it be question, you come up with a hypothesis. Each of those could it be's is a hypothesis. And then the final way is a let it be. There are some questions that are worth asking that are just outside of the realm of science because we can't use either inference or direct observation to answer them. And so for the time being, they're just outside of the realm of what we do. But they still might be important things for us to think about. And those are the realms where I might bring in poetry or other ways to feel about them. But absolutely, I agree with you. So sometimes there's the idea that you can go look it up. But there's also how can we figure these things. All the things that are on Google somewhere came from people just like us, sitting down on stump and looking hard and either doing hypothesis testing or making observations. And we can do it too. I absolutely agree with you. Thank you.